Welcome back. Welcome back. This is Jay, season 2, volume 17, brother. This is a big accomplishment for us, right? This is the second season of a show that we kind of debuted around this time last year. But listen, it's Saturday morning, right? The coffee is hot. The Philadelphia sports teams are hot. Listen, we got a ton to talk about. Welcome in, brother. How you doing?
Doing well, brother. It's been a hot minute since we've been on a show. Work schedule's been insane. I know, same thing for you.
Listen,
I
can appreciate that.
It's always rough around the fall time because it's when everything starts picking up, especially well, I know because you're back to school, obviously. So
yeah,
in your line of work, it's picked back up already, and retail, obviously, getting ready for Halloween, and then it'll be Thanksgiving, and then it'll be Christmas. It's like we already got.
Jay, my dad sent me a text. He went into Lowe's last weekend, and there was already the Christmas display was already up, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can't!" Like, can we please, for the love of God, let one holiday breathe?
Never will happen again.
No, it'll never happen again because it'll just be the convergence of all that stuff. But welcome in, brother, man. Listen, we got the sponsors are along the bottom. We got Lots of Rain luxury watches. We got Team Clicks, which is the sports themed the eyeglassware. You got Shocked Energy, which is now part of a group called Level Up Snacks. So they're going. We got Streaker Sports, and Jay, we're working on something special. I'm gonna hold it in, but we got something special that is brewing.
Nice.
Well, listen, Jay, let's start. We'll talk some Flyers off-season moves, and then we'll kind of go around the league a little bit. We'll save our predictions for the episode right before the season starts. So to start at the top, Jay, the biggest offseason moves, which we kind of discussed a little bit when we kind of met up in October, or not October, in August over the summer, right? The biggest change for the Flyers over the offseason was the coach, right? They bring in John Tortorella, who, for all intents and purposes, appears to be the guy that's going to be here throughout this process. And I think you're already starting to see some evidence of that in the future, or not in the future, in the last couple of weeks, in terms of some guys that have been shifted and shifted based on their performance on the ice. So talk to me about where you are with Tortorella.
I mean, I love Tortorella. I always have. I thought, that what this team lacks the most is heart. Well, obviously they lack the elite talent level, but they lack heart, number one, because I looked at last year's team, and it's not that they don't have good players. It's just they came to every game lackluster. Their attitude sucked. The play on the ice was sloppy, and you could just tell that they didn't want to be there. And that's like an infectious attitude, and it's almost like a disease. Once it starts, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And honestly, to me, John Tortorella is a guy, a lot of people don't like him, but you know what? When you're a coach, you're not there to be liked. You're there to get a job done. Right. And he's the kind of coach that this team needs. A lot of these players, like, we've talked about, obviously, my feelings on certain individual players. I'm not going to get into that because I don't want this show to go negative. I'm trying to have a positive attitude. It's fresh. It's a new season. So I'm trying to start out positive and not just kind of go the direction that I normally do on these shows.
Jay, we got to get you like a giant case of Philadelphia sports Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I agree because listen, I mean, I know you and I were tweeting back and forth yesterday, and I was even listen. I'll take responsibility again. I took responsibility last year with Harper yesterday I made it a tweet in the heat of the moment during the Phillies game. I know this is going off base, but I made a tweet that,
Cool.
the game is over. And of course, obviously the Phillies came back. So you know what? I'm not the first one that's ever made that mistake.
No,
I think
Jay,
you could probably
you will
go
not
down
be
the
the last.
timeline and find about 1,000 of them, but I tend to get all the grief, and that's fine. I take it. It's a badge of honor, and you know what? Like I said, I'm trying to be positive. So with that being said, I'm not going to go off on a tangent on how there's certain players I don't like on this team. I want to talk about the things I do like, and I love the coach. I think the coach, you asked me the question, what are my thoughts? I think John Tortorella is exactly what this team has been missing for a while. He's somebody that's he's not going to put up with bullshit. And as you said, you're already seeing it. And I'm sure there's players that don't like him. And you know what? That's fine. Because if they don't like him and they don't get better or improve, then they're not going to play.
Right.
So that's simple. So
no, listen, the evidence is showing itself already, Mike. Listen, Mike, we're going to try to try to steer ourselves away from the frustration here. We're going to try to keep it positive. Jay, I'm with you on the coach. I love what this guy brings to this team in terms of his attitude and leadership. I think in a team that's in a position that they're in where the talent is maybe not normally where we would want it to be going into a season, I think you're also going to see this coach get the best out of the guys that he has. And that's part of his MO is to either get better than what they have out of those players. So I'm in for it all. I love putting that leadership. I know there were some other guys that people had talked about in terms of, Barry Trotz was a guy that had been discussed a lot. When he turns down that job, they kind of go to 1A and go Tortorella. I think that might end up being a move that this team. It will be a good thing that coach passed on this job because I think this guy is right for the job.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, like I said, I think you could have, there's other directions you could have went, but I don't think a guy like Barry Trotz would have been the right coach. Yeah. Not even.
No, I get you, Jeff. Yes, I'm with you.
Like I said, Barry Trotz. I don't think this team is a team that's ready to compete for a championship.
No.
That's the kind of coach that I'd want if they were. So.
Oh, absolutely.
They definitely made the right decision. Like I said, I think a lot of people will be pleasantly surprised. I think what I'm looking for from this team, the big difference is I'm not looking at the stat sheet and I'm not looking at wins and losses. I'm looking all about effort. Is the effort there? Is the heart there? That's, to me as a fan, if that's there, I'm not going to say I'm going to be super, pumped up and happy if they're the worst team in the league record-wise. But what I will say is, at least if the heart is there and the care is there, I'm going to want to watch. And that's really the most important thing. Like, what is going to keep me tuned in? What is going to get my attention as a fan that is frustrated? I mean, obviously, a lot of us are frustrated. But, hopefully there's some things coming down the pipeline. I know we've talked to Jesse. He had some, ideas and thoughts of, if somebody else could take over the team. And that's obviously the ultimate thing that could probably turn this thing around. But in the short term, I'm looking at, is the effort there? And I think you're going to see effort. And there's guys on the team, like I said, like they don't have the elite goal scorers that's going to score 50 goals a game or, get 120 points a year. But what they do have is some, nice pesky players that, are going to kind of be in your face, gritty type guys. If you're going to ask me about guys that I'm kind of looking forward to and I want to see progress, I mean, two guys on my radar are Morgan Frost and Owen Tippett. Like, I would love to see those guys, nothing more than those guys actually become something because they were high draft picks.
Right.
And, I know in Owen Tippett's case, it's a change of scenery. So maybe that does the trick.
I mean, I think giving him the space with a young lineup might be a good place for him to see a more, maybe I'm going to put it in air quotes, free version of him. When he's playing in Florida last year, right? There's a lot of top end talent at the top of that Panthers roster. So I think maybe him being in a position where he may be kind of forced to be that guy because there's not a ton of top level elite talent on this team, maybe puts him in a position where he can play a little bit more free. And, let's be honest, like the talent on the ice is there. You see flashes of it. So I think, Tippett is a guy that I'm looking at that I got to say, like, I need production out of that guy in order for this team, in order for me to continue to stay interested in this team.
Yeah. And so, I mean, obviously we probably get into, the roster and stuff, but like,
sure.
I think the other area that I looked at on this team that was kind of lacking over the last couple of years is a defensive presence. Like guys that actually give a shit on the defense.
Yeah.
Because I think we all agree the most important player on the team is Carter Hart. I mean, he's
100%.
Basically your franchise goalie and a guy that we all were super stoked about when he came onto the scene and his first year when he had that run and we got the playoffs and we made it to the second round and he really looked like a superstar. And then obviously the rails just went off and it wasn't his fault. And the problem about young goalies is it's all about confidence. And if you have a defense that's not going to play well in front of you, you're in trouble. And that's why I'm super focused on the defense. And we have guys on the defense that, are big name guys. I mean, Ivan Provorov, we've all wanted him to be that guy. But every year it just seems like there's just something missing from him. So he's a guy that I'm hoping can kind of get it all figured out. Because sooner or later you get to the point where you're like, is it ever gonna be figured out? That's the question I have. Obviously a lot of people don't like the D'Angelo acquisition. I mean, and I'm not going to get into that kind of thing either, but
we're going to keep it strictly on the ice.
Yeah. D'Angelo has talent. I mean,
yes.
With him, it was all off ice stuff. I mean,
listen,
what can he bring to the table? That's what I want to see.
Right. I think Jay, what you see, and even to go back to the coaching, they bring in Rocky Thompson, who is a guy who is notoriously a ball breaker and not going to take anybody's shit from anybody. For Christ's sake, he has the history of getting in the fight with Evander Kane. He has a history of being a fiery presence on the bench. So I look at between him and Tortorella, if I'm looking at, they trade and sign Tony D'Angelo, I like that from a standpoint of creating a defensive presence in front of Carter Hart, because I think that's going to be a key for this team to be successful. And I'm going to put that again in air quotes, to show progress. I think you're going to need someone to be his protector, right? You're going to need somebody who's going to knock guys out of the way in front of the net. You're going to need guys that are going to knock down shots. Tony D'Angelo is a guy that if he plays to his talent, you're going to get a really good, productive back end player.
Yeah, I mean, I everything you're saying is spot on. I think, I go back to the coach aspect of it. I think this team has been playing under a culture that's kind of tainted. The culture in the Flyers, overall organization is just not where it needs to be. And it's hard to change a culture when you don't change a bunch of players. So they have a lot of returning players, but I think that's why adding a coach like Tortorella is important, because he will be able to change the culture. Like, he's going to drive the bus. Like, when you don't have players that are like big time leaders, it's important to have a coach that's a leader. We talk about it in baseball. It's the same thing in baseball. Like, you have to
absolutely.
have, some teams are lucky to have both, but a lot of times it's like you got to look for the mix. If you don't have a coach that's a good leader, then you need strong leadership in the locker room. But if you have a coach that can really be that leader, then it's not as important if you don't have that leadership, if you know what I'm saying. Like, and I'm not saying that the Flyers don't have anybody that can be a leader. I mean, Kevin Hayes, is a veteran, and he brings a lot. Trying to think, of other guys. I mean, looking at the roster, I mean,
Nick Deslauriers is a guy who they also bring in, right? He's a guy that is going to be that veteran enforcer, a guy that is going to look to, be that presence, right? Be that presence when he's on the ice. And listen, if they're not building this team through a bunch of top end talent, I don't hate this strategy of going on there and having guys that are going to, mess guys up, that are guys they're going to get in guys' way, that are going to be guys that are going to enforce on the ice. I'm okay, right? Because I'm fumbling over my words, right? But like, it's hard to say that, like, what other choice did you have, right? You were either going to go this way and get these enforcers to be a more defensive presence type of team, or you were just going to sell everything and be completely young guys and see what you had. And actually, when I looked at it, I was like, I was okay either way. Like, if you want to go this route and you want to be that defensive presence team, I'm okay with that. If you wanted to go young and like young, and bring all these guys up and see what you have out of what is the top end talent in your farm system, I was also okay with that. So it's a kind of like, to me, this year is kind of like a let's just see what we have kind of year.
Unfortunately, you really have no other choice. I mean, at the end of the day, you all right?
No, I'm good. I just gotta.
At the end of the day, as I said, we as fans want to be able to observe a good product on the ice, and that's really what I'm looking forward to. I'm hoping that this team has an energy level that is basically a 360 from last year, because last year was just obviously, like I said, a dumpster fire, and it's just you kind of do get to the point where you're like, well, what if, and it just sucks that to have to ask those questions. Like, guy like Ryan Ellis, who might not ever play for this team, we when we signed him, like, the expectation was like, oh my God, we got Ryan Ellis, and like now it's like, we're in year 2 and he hasn't, he's played 3 games in his Flyers career.
And Jay, the strangest thing about that is that you've heard nothing.
Oh yeah, and then you still don't hear anything. And that's like, what the hell is going on? Like,
it's like he fell into a black hole of hockey.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So you got him, and then obviously Couturier. Now, I don't know. I haven't really saw any recent reports. Like, what's the story with him? Is he out long term, or is it only a short term injury this time? Because he's starting to frustrate me too with his injury. History.
Yeah, listen,
it seems like this team is like snake bitten by injury too. Like, I know it's not an excuse, but you have to admit, like, every single season, it seems like they're just hit by the injury bug. It never goes away.
Yeah, and does that go back to, is it training? Is it strength and conditioning? Is it player development? Is it coaching? And I think where I saw, and this is broken news, but like, since the ownership has changed hands, you've seen the steady decline in all of the off ice things. So I'm starting to wonder, right, if there is not nearly as much money invested in the off ice things, the training staff, the player development, are we starting to see a translation with the on ice production because guys are hurt, guys are injured, guys are not developing, and it's now multiple years of seeing a mediocre to bad franchise.
I mean, it's a question that obviously keeps popping up, and I don't know if we'll ever have a full answer, but like I said, I think we need to get back to the positives, but like,
yeah.
So,
absolutely.
So what are your thoughts on Carter Hart? Like where, as far as his development, because like I said, I think it's hard for me to judge being that their defense has been so bad. Like I need to see a full season of his play where the defense actually comes to play and actually does their job.
Yeah, I think you're looking at a season where you want to see continued progress, right? Because I've been on both sides of the fence. I've talked out of both sides of my mouth and saying, listen, Carter Hart is the guy that you can't move on from because he's the only thing you have that's holding this team's relevancy. And then I've also said at the same on different shows, right, that is it something that you consider moving on from him because you don't have enough time to be able to circle back when this team will be better again, where he can be at the center of that rebuild. So I'm just looking for progress, right? I'm looking for him to play more, stay healthy, and if they have these enforcers in front of him, that maybe it makes it easier for him to be more productive.
Yeah, because see, so I've kind of been on both sides of the fence too. I tend to say, maybe they need to move on from him because, as you mentioned, they're not going to be relevant. But then I remember a guy named Carey Price, and
correct.
I remember
that's the one
early in his career had some struggles, and it took until the team actually kind of gelled as a franchise and kind of got to a further step down the road where you started to see the results of that progression. So I think Carter Hart is young enough that you can stick with him through a rebuild. And I know they're not calling it a rebuild. They call it an aggressive retool or whatever the hell they want to call it. I guess,
Jay, you can phrase it. You can phrase it whatever way you want to.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is to me is that I still think Carter Hart has an ability to be an elite goalie in this league, and I think he has all the tools. It's just about the confidence.
Yeah,
that's the number one thing. It's not that he's ever lacked the physical talent. We know he has the physical talent. We witnessed it. I mean, that's playoff run that he had when we went and we almost beat the Islanders was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, he carried that team that whole end of the season and then into the playoffs. Like, so I know it's there.
It's there.
It's just been confidence with him, and it's hard to get confidence when the team is just so inconsistent in front of you, and that's why I said. To me, I think the number one thing besides the coaching change is the defense being able to actually come together and play together as a unit. And like I said, I'm not looking at numbers per se. I'm not looking at that. I'm looking more of the effort.
Yeah,
and when the team is playing bad, are they looking to improve? Is Ivan Provorov staying after training, and is he skating on his own? Is he doing these things that you need to do when you're not where you need to be? Like, I look at athletes and I get it. They're athletes. So we can't really put ourselves in their position because I'm not making 20 million or whatever they're making a year.
Right.
But I do know that I look at any type of business, I'll just give you an example in retail. Like, you might not be the best at your craft, but the people that aren't born with that natural elite talent, let's face it, the people that are born with that are few and far between. The elite of the elite athletes are a small portion.
Very, very small.
Most of the guys that get to where they are, they have to work for it.
Truly.
It doesn't just come to you. So I look at guys that end up, you look at their career at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
How is their work ethic? And 90% of the time, it's the players that have that strong work ethic that go the extra mile that are the better players. The guys that just think that they have the talent, but they're not willing to put in the work, they are the ones that end up out of the league. And that's why I've mentioned it with, like, Ben Simmons is a perfect example. A guy that has all the talent in the world, but he doesn't work for it and he doesn't give it shit. And it's obvious. If he did, there would be improvement. And we could go down the list. I mean, there's plenty of guys that, you look at and you're just like, why did they not put in the extra effort? I mean, Travis Konechny. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not making this a bashing section, but if Travis Konechny just started maybe working a little harder and staying after practice and doing these things, instead of having a holier-than-thou attitude like, I belong here and I made it. No, you haven't made it, bud. You need to work for it. And that's what I'm saying. Like, and that's what's been missing from this team. It's like, I want to see guys that, like, say, I'm tired of this losing culture. I'm tired of it. Like, I want to be better. That's what I want to see.
And Jay, that could be where you see guys like Nick Delorier, where you see guys like Tony D'Angelo come in, and maybe they are that presence in the locker room that can, get on a young guy and maybe force that young guy to say, hey, listen, I'm staying after, and so are you. We're going to work on these things, and maybe have someone in the locker room that is going to be demonstrating what that hard work and effort look like, because maybe they've been in this situation where that hasn't been asked of them. And they might be the type of player, like, and Jay, we all know those guys, right? That if you don't tell them they need to work on something, they're not going to work on anything. So maybe those guys are guys that are, guys that bring that aggressive, hard-nosed, tough presence to this locker room. And maybe that helps those young guys. Maybe that gives those young guys that just that little kick that they need to maybe kind of maybe they're not going to jump to a top tier player, but maybe they jump a level. Maybe they improve on one part of their game, and by improving in that part of the game, that positively affects their on ice performances.
Yeah, I mean, that makes 100%.
Yeah. And Joe, 100% agree, right? The issues with this team are way above the team, the most important issues. And that could be a whole nother show. But yeah, the guys that are in the leadership positions are probably the biggest thing that's wrong with this team. Truly.
Well, yeah, and that's hard to change.
And that's right, unless and we've heard whispers on varying shows, that the leadership group with the Flyers could potentially change at some point. But until that does, and until that direction is changed, this team is going to be kind of where it is, and that's hard. That's hard to take in terms of seeing what this franchise was and what it could be. So we'll see. Jay, around anything else you want to touch on Flyers wise before we jump around the league a little bit?
No, I mean, I think, like you said, the show we do before the season, we'll kind of do our preview and our predictions, and
Sure.
we can even do our league predictions then.
Yeah.
I think today we kind of just review it. Thoughts on
Sure. Now listen, Jay, the offseason move, the biggest offseason move is the offseason move that never happened, right? In terms of what we all thought was the inevitable. And Johnny Hockey goes to Columbus when everybody and their mother had him penciled to come to Philadelphia. And that deal just ends up, on varying programs and podcasts, right? The word was out there that entire Johnny Gaudreau camp had their mind made up that Philadelphia was going to be his next destination. And the Flyers basically said, we're good. I don't understand. The cost of that was not inordinate. It was not something that was unattainable. You would have had to move some pieces around, but you could have made it work, and it would have worked on a million different levels because this franchise would be so in such a better place, even from a just a genuine interest point of view, right? People would have tuned in to see the hometown kid that came home that was playing for his hometown team.
Yeah, I mean, we could probably do a whole show on our disappointment and aggravation that we didn't get Johnny Hockey, but I mean that would have been nice to have that kind of a player to follow. I mean, honestly,
but that's a big deal for Columbus.
I look at the Flyers as like the last time I had that type of player on the team, the one that like I just want to kind of watch just to see them. You have to probably go back to like when Danny Briere was here as a player.
Yeah,
at least for me, my personal. I mean, Danny Briere was just a guy that just he always went from 0 to 60. Like he just
truly,
his energy level was second to none. His heart on the ice was like just the guy that I wanted to watch. Like, obviously a smaller guy, like a guy you would never expect to have that kind of talent. And he just, always proved his doubters wrong. I mean, yeah, I think of guys like that. I always like the smaller players for some reason. For me, it's weird. Mark Recchi was like one of my favorites, like all time. And
I'm convinced that's a Philly thing, Jay. We have the obsessions with the little guys, the underdogs, the backup catchers, the backup quarterbacks. That's a Philly thing. I'm convinced that's a Philly thing, that we're obsessed with, like the guy because that type of mentality is something that this city embodies.
Agreed.
So, another big offseason move, right, is a guy that used to be on the Flyers, right? Claude Giroux, ends up back in Ottawa. Alex DeBrincat ends up back in Ottawa, right? They have a good offseason in terms of really making themselves a contender in that division.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. It's weird seeing Claude Giroux. I mean, it was weird seeing him last year in Florida, and it's even more weird seeing him on Ottawa. I watched like a highlight of one of the preseason games the other day, and I saw he did well. It was him and DeBrincat. They seem like they have a great chemistry, and that just shows you, like, obviously the scenery has changed, and obviously he's in a different organization. But Claude Giroux, like, for all the haters, the people that always said that he was overrated. I mean, listen, like, I know he didn't win a championship here, but it's hard to blame one player when, what did the organization do? I mean, like, I look at it as, Claude Giroux, to me, really nice guy that he cares. I mean, everyone that always said like he doesn't care, like that just doesn't fly to me. Like, because I just look at how he just seems happier. Like, just seeing him, like, I don't know, it looks like his age is like less. Like, he looks younger. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think that could be a product of him playing, a lot closer to home, right? That idea of being in a place where you're really comfortable with does a lot for your mental health. So like it could just put him in a better place where the pressure doesn't feel like it's nearly as much for him to perform on the ice, and that just makes him play on a whole nother level of well, it's a whole different comfort level, right?
I mean, and
And
I
you
get that. I get the pressure level. Like, playing in Philly, we all know it's probably one of the toughest cities to play in as an athlete. Period. On any sport. I mean, whether it's baseball, basketball, hockey, or football, because we have such passionate fan bases.
right.
But at the end of the day, like I look at guys like that, and I'm like, how's the talent level around them? I mean, if you think about it, like we've had a revolving door of goaltenders through pretty much his entire career until Carter Hart got here.
Right.
And once Carter Hart did get here, like I said, you had the one good year, and then it's like almost like the bottom just dropped out of the team. I mean, but I never like to blame one player. And listen, like I'm critical of Giroux, but I gotta be honest, I'm happy for him as a fan, knowing that he's in
as a
better
hockey
place
fan, yes,
now.
truly.
And I want him to succeed. Like, why wouldn't I? I mean, if you don't, then there's something wrong because, like, the guy, it's not like he was a bad guy. It's not like he was here and he threw players under the bus, and it's not like he was that kind of player. Like,
I harbor no ill will.
Kind of always just did his job on the ice and went home, and that's all I can really ask for. Like, I mean, you want to have an ire against somebody, like he's not the guy to have your ire. I mean, Voracek, Voracek. I don't care if you have an ire against him because he was an idiot. He's a guy that blocked pretty much 90% of Flyers fans, but just because they, voiced their opinion, and like I don't know, he was just a clown to me. But anyway, that was Voracek. Guy that had a lot of talent, but just never mind. I don't want to get into that, but
it's okay.
Now he'll probably watch on Twitter and give us a bad review. But
listen, I'll take the review. It is what it is. Listen, we can go to go down to Nashville, right? Nashville locks up Forsberg to it's an 8-year contract for him. But he's only 27 years old. So it's relatively affordable considering the presence that he brings to that team.
Yeah, I mean, he's another guy. Like, there's so many young guys. Like,
yeah.
To me, 27 years old in hockey is young.
Oh, that's
these
very
guys
young.
Huh?
That's very young, right? Considering
these guys start when they're like 19, 20 years old. So 27 is like just going into their prime. Who do you think? I mean, obviously, we already talked about Johnny Hockey. Like, who do you think's the most underrated move of the offseason? Like a guy that,
I mean,
a big name, but
God, an underrated move. Wow. I think a move that that we talk about that was a guy that we thought would have some interest in this is Kadri, right? Kadri's a guy that is like top level elite talent, and I feel like that everybody kind of waited for that signing to happen, and then nobody talks about it.
Yeah, he would have been a nice piece. I agree.
Mm-hmm. But I think he's like that. The impact that he'll have is going to be, it'll be good. It'll be good for him, and I think he's in a good spot. But that's a guy that like I thought it would get a lot more play than it did.
You mean more attention?
Yeah, like more attention. Like I thought it would be like people would be talking about that a lot more, and it seems like everybody waited for him to sign, and then now
I think when it comes to hockey, I think Colorado always gets slighted as far as national attention. Like even when they're good, I mean, because let's face it, they won a couple cups. They've been really good the last couple years. I mean, obviously Nathan McKinnon and the rest of the roster, but well, actually, I'm thinking Kadri. Kadri wasn't on. He was Toronto, or was he?
No. So
Colorado.
So he Colorado, but he ends up in Calgary.
So I am right, huh? Calgary.
He ends up in Calgary.
So he replaced Johnny Hockey.
Johnny Hockey, yeah.
I mean, honestly,
I don't know if nobody's and I don't know if nobody's talking about it because around here. Is it because?
Well, I'm sure
Canada?
In Canada they're talking about it. I think around here they're probably not talking about it because either A, we're pissed off that we didn't get them, or B, we're just so stuck on focusing on teams like Washington with Ovechkin, more of the local teams. But that is a really good move. But it hurts Colorado. I'm surprised that they didn't try to sign him, but I guess their cap is they have so many good young players that I guess they have to kind of. That's what makes it so tough. The new NHL, and everyone everyone talks about the Flyers used to sign all these players, and it was so much easier then because there was no cap. So Ed Snyder could pretty much have a blank.
You just write a check
and just bring in whoever he wanted. And those days are over. And that's what makes it more hard. And that's why you need a good GM. That's why I'm not, I mean, he talked about Dave Scott, the owner, but I'm not too high on our GM right now. That I think is in hockey. It's so important to have a GM that's smart, not just with player development and roster, decisions, but also the other level now that you have in the NHL with the cap. And that's why Howie Roseman is so friggin' awesome, because he's becoming better at the personnel side of things, and he's already been a genius at that part.
Right.
Whereas with hockey, like I said, there's certain GMs that just seem to not have any idea how to manage the cap and just some of the decisions that are made. I mean, and we're still paying for that. Obviously JVR comes to mind. I mean, a guy I'm shocked that is still on the roster. And listen, I have no ill will against JVR. I just think he's overpriced and he's not giving you what he's being paid for. And that was Ron Hextall. That wasn't Chuck Fletcher. Right. So I'll give Fletcher a buy on that one. But that's part of the problem. Ron Hextall, I know a lot of people can't stand the guy now because of the position we're in, but I just think that was one thing that Ron Hextall, even though he played in the NHL as a goalie, and we loved him when he played, and he had a lot of experience at that part of the game, and he's good with knowing players maybe, but his problem was we kind of shit the bed in the draft, and that side of thing, I think Ron Hextall could use a lot of. They had a couple experience with because they just signed too many guys that just the signings just ruined the team. And that's why you have to be so smart now, with how you build your roster. So in one sense, it's okay, we don't have an Alex Ovechkin that we have to pay $10 million a year to now, but the Flyers are in a position where they can really right the ship now if they continue to shed the payroll, continue to get younger, and then you get to the point where you finally have the money to be able to sign a guy that's kind of generational or difference-making player. It's just they've been so locked in with these contracts, and it's a hard thing to kind of
it's a longer process than I think the Flyers are willing to admit, right? And that it's going to take a long period of time where they have to shed those contracts, they have to rebuild the farm system, build it from the ground up. But then you look at a team like Pittsburgh, right? Pittsburgh's a team that has made they've made the playoffs in 16 straight seasons, and and I read this stat, and I had to go back and check. They have not picked. They picked in the first round twice in the last 8 years. So like they've developed talent. They've been able to continue to be in the conversation for the playoffs in the postseason every year. And I don't think that's not a far stretch. But they re-sign, right? They re-sign Malkin, Letang, Rust, and Raquel to long-term contracts, right? And those guys, you would think that at some point in time, those contracts are going to catch up with them.
Who's their GM?
Talk to me, Jay.
Who's their GM? Ron Hextall, right?
Yeah.
After I was just bashing the guy, but you're right. Like, I think what that shows you is that eventually you can only pay the piper so long before you get burned. Eagles dealt with it. They were able to have a quick turnaround because of obviously the Wentz thing and this and that. But like that works to a certain extent. But see, Pittsburgh's had the ability to do that because they have that luxury. They have a great roster overall. They've had Crosby a long time of those 16 years. What? How long's Crosby been in the league? 12 or 13 years, is he?
Yeah, it's got to be.
So they've had top-level talent. They already had it. That's the difference. And you know, we've talked about a team like Tampa Bay Lightning who basically pretty much built their entire core through the draft. They just nailed every pick, and they not only nailed every pick, they developed the other guys that they drafted lower. And that's probably the biggest difference between the Flyers and those kind of teams. The Flyers have had, you look at the Flyers roster, it's littered with first-round picks. I mean, we have a ton of homegrown talent. It's just the talent has never reached the peak that you would expect to what we thought it would be when you drafted these guys, like Konechny. Like, he's definitely not ever reached where we thought he'd be at this point in his career.
Jay, to speak to something you're talking about, right, and to answer Joe's question, right, who actually has who on this team could you foresee having a good offensive year?
I think Cam Atkinson. I think he has experience with Tortorella, and I think he's a guy that I was excited for last year. And I think overall, I think you'd have to say Cam Atkinson had a pretty decent year. I mean, he didn't have eye-popping numbers, but he was probably one of the best players and a guy that actually I could say brought it 90% of the time. So I can't look at a guy like that and say that he's going to be worse this year. I think he'll only be better under Tortorella, especially because he's a veteran and he has the ability to put the puck in the net.
Yep.
I think if you want my under the radar guy, a guy I think that's going to kind of take a giant step forward, and I'm hoping I'm right on this. I could be totally wrong, but I think Owen Tippett. I think I could see him, and I'm not saying he's going to have 40 goals, but 20 goals. I would be happy with that.
Yeah, I think
I don't think anybody on the Flyers is going to have. You want a great year offensively, Joe? I don't think anybody on this team is going to be in the top 100 in scoring.
And Jay, we had that conversation multiple times, especially through the end of the season. It was kind of like the running joke where we were like, okay, where is the Flyers' highest scoring player in the top 100?
And it grew.
But the funny thing was that every time we checked, that number got lower, and where they were in terms of having their highest player, where it ranked in the NHL, just kept dropping.
And meanwhile, you had teams like Tampa Bay that had like 5 guys in the top 50. Like that's the talent level disparity. It's the best telltale sign right there. It's like, and yes, I know it's not all about numbers. Once again, it's a team sport. It's
you're gonna have to use your eyeballs this year.
But yeah, it's not. You're not gonna look for that, Joe. I think what I can promise you is that this team will be. There will be passion on the ice. It will be a better product to watch. I think they're going to be better defensively. I don't think you're going to see a lot of those blowouts that you saw in the previous 2 years where Flyers lost 9-0. I don't think you're going to see those kind of games this year. Because I think Tortorella won't stand for it. If that happens, heads will roll. Like, there will be guys that will be cut. Like, I can guarantee you right now that Tortorella did not come here unless he had a lot of say in player roster decisions. I can guarantee you that John Tortorella is the kind of guy that if he's not liking the direction this organization's going, he's going to speak his mind. He's not afraid, dude, because he knows he can go back to being an analyst. He doesn't give a shit.
No.
In his mind, like, he will be able to tell Chuck Fletcher, yo, he'll go in there with a plan, and when these guys don't perform and he sits them and then he puts them back and they still don't do what he says,
right?
I guarantee you there's going to be trades. There's going to be guys out of here this year because Tortorella is going to, like I said, he'll go to management and he'll say, this is my plan. These guys don't fit into that plan.
Let's move on.
Let's move.
Yeah, and Jay, the two guys when this question popped up in the comments, those were the two guys that I thought about. Right, Atkinson because of his history, and Tippett because of the potential of what this team could be. Right, and and Jay or Jesse, I hope that this year is a lot better than people think, and I hope that they play really well and surprise a bunch of teams. In terms of not the expectations for this team right now, I think are at an all-time low. So I think the only way to go is up in terms of what the production on the ice could be in relationship to how this team produces. And he's saying here, Torts being here is a prime example of not go. Okay, so yeah, listen, he absolutely hated losing, would not sign on. Absolutely, I think if he is not the type of coach that is going to be your he is not going to be the Flyers version of Brett Brown, right? He's not going to be here and just kind of be here through some kind of like shit show where it's just below level talent. I think he's here. I think it's going to be a slow build for him to be able to start to shape this roster. And Jay, you might see off-season move or in-season moves where you're able to get those players that he needs in order to run his system efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't expect the team to be god awful.
No,
I think Jesse's right. I think they're gonna surprise people. I'm not ready to go out on a limb. Obviously, we're not doing our predictions. But I'm not going to go out and say that they're going to, make the playoffs. But what I will say is I look for this team to be better than people expect. As Jesse said, like,
there we go.
The product on the ice is going to be much better than last year. And I think a lot of people aren't believing that. I think there's people out there that are just saying, oh man, the Flyers, they just suck and they're going to suck forever. And it's totally not true because Tortorella, like I said, I think you cannot understate the importance of a head coach that's going to actually have this team firing on all cylinders and have there's going to be direction.
Correct, right, and to speak to Joe's point, right, that it's that shot of adrenaline that kind of keeps people accountable throughout the season. And Jess, you're asking about we did kind of insinuate the conversation about Cam York in terms of the accountability, right? But Jay, what was your feeling about the idea that how they handled the Cam York situation?
I think it was great.
It sends a very clear message.
I don't care about your pedigree. I've said it, that either does Tortorella.
Right.
Tortorella is going to make examples of players, and he's going to do it in I call him an evil genius. Like, his message just comes across like it's not really even directed at, like, he doesn't care what anybody. He's not worried about what we think. He's worried about getting this team better, and he's not worried about what the players think. He's doing what he thinks is the right decision for the team, and I like that. who can fault a guy that's going to come in and actually hold people accountable? I mean, that's what this team has been missing forever. I mean, shit, it's a breath of fresh air to actually have a coach that, is demanding his players to be better.
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that a coach's job at the end of the day to get your team better? So, yeah, I think it's awesome. Good. I mean,
yeah. Listen, I love the idea of accountability is exactly where I'm at, right? And Joe's asking about connecting. It could happen, Joe. It could happen where that welcome is just exhausted, and that could be one of those in-season moves, Jay, that you're talking about, where it's not working out here, and they decide to move on. Yeah, and Jess, you're slightly more, you're a little bit more plugged in on this than we are, but yeah, I think that the idea that he was not the best in camp, and I think it really does do a great job at showing the players who's in control, right? And who's making the decisions on this roster is the guy that's going to be standing behind the bench.
Yeah, and I had mentioned that earlier in the show that Tortorella would not have come here if he wasn't given a large portion of roster control. Like, I can guarantee you that was a sticking point when he was hired.
Oh, absolutely.
He's never been a guy that's going to come here and just be kind of a figurehead.
Agreed.
There's a fine line when it comes to, GM and coach relationship. At the end of the day, the general manager is kind of in charge of player personnel and roster decisions, but the coach is the one that's managing the day in and day out operation of the team. So you have to have a coach. You have to allow your coach to have that autonomy, because if he doesn't, it's almost like sending a mixed message. Like, that's why we always have like these questions when you hear these reports of like Howie Roseman like telling certain players he wants to play. Like, I remember we heard that about Rager and this and that, and it's like, dude, it's frustrating. Like, you have to let your coach make the final decisions, because at the end of the day, the best players should be on the ice, and that's why I'm confident, because I think that no matter what, you're going to see a better product. You're going to see that energy. You're going to see that fire, and you're going to see guys that are like seeing this play out. And there's probably guys in the locker room right now, and they're saying, well, Cam York, he had this pedigree. He was a first-round pick. Everyone claims how great he is, and, he's the next defensive one guy on the team, and oh wow, he got sent down. Well, I better watch my ass, because I could be looking for a job. Like, that's the message that Tortorella sends by doing that.
Absolutely,
and it speaks volumes of how it speaks volumes to the amount of control that he does have.
Oh, absolutely, and I think it's a good message to send now, right? To do that at the beginning of the season and set that message, right? It's kind of the equivalent, like for me, like I know that for me at the start of the school year, I gotta hit them hard first, because I can always walk it back a little bit, but I can't start the year having a party and then 2 weeks later try to start enforcing the rules. So I think where they are in terms of the approach there is great. I think it's a good place to begin.
Come in like a lion, leave like a lamb.
Correct. Right. But listen, Jay, before we jump out, right, I gotta share our new project that's kind of it's on a slow trajectory. But if you're a Flyers fan, if you're a Philadelphia sports fan, if you're watching a game, if you're feeling like you want to chime in and you want to have your voice be a part of our show, right? We've got a new segment that we're incorporating into each one of our shows. where we have a call-in line. You call in, you leave a message. We play it on the show. We talk about it. So it doesn't matter if it's Phillies, Flyers, Sixers, Eagles. Listen, at this point, we'll take any kind of hot take you want, any kind of sports-related comments. We got the Broad Street line.
This is the Broad Street line, where Philly sports fans leave all of their sports hot takes. Call 267-405-3062 and show us your passion for Philly sports. Don't forget to tune in every Wednesday at 8:30 when we listen to your live reactions to the thrill of victory or the agony of defeat.
So if you're out there, if you're tailgating, if you're watching a game, something sucky happens, you're pissed off, you're mad, we want to hear it. We want it to be a part of our show. So, chime in, get those things in. We're really looking forward to having that be something that's going to start to grow and be more of a part of our show.
Did we have any calls?
We have not had any Flyers related calls. We've had a handful of Eagles calls. We've had a handful of Phillies calls. But we have not had any Flyers calls yet. I'm sure as the season starts to evolve, I'm sure we'll have a handful of our friends chime in and voice their frustrations.
Maybe Merrill Reese will drop back in.
Merrill Reese dropped in on week one.
In the hockey show, maybe let's see, who's the other guy? Coatsy. Maybe Coatsy will make an appearance.
I would love it. I would love it. Jay, let's roll into final thoughts, brother. What do you got?
Final thoughts. Just as I always try to do, show some love for your fellow, friends. Always just be there, reach out, be an open ear. It's tough. It's going into the holiday season. This is actually, for people that struggle with mental illness, mental health, it's probably the most difficult season of the year. We're going into this holiday season, and it's very difficult sometimes for people that don't have a good, strong friend base or aren't close to their family, and it's hard for people that are close to their family and are able to have those functions to go to and have fun to relate to people that don't, because if you're not in that shoes, it's very hard to understand that. Yeah. So just be aware of that and be mindful that not everybody's actually happy when it comes to this time of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think being the voice, not necessarily being a voice. Sometimes people don't need you to have a conversation with them. Sometimes they just need you to listen. And I think that speaks into that empathy piece where you really start to, understand where someone's coming from and not necessarily have to give them a solution either.
Yeah, I mean, great point. A lot of times it's just being there for somebody, but also being aware and mindful that a lot of times people that struggle with depression and anxiety, many times they avoid people. They kind of isolate and they self-isolate. So if you haven't heard from a friend that you normally hear from all the time,
just check in.
Make sure you check in, because a lot of times they won't tell you that they're struggling. Yeah. They just kind of back off. So you kind of got to be able to read the signs and kind of, understand that when you start seeing a difference in patterns, that sometimes might signal that person's kind of struggling. But just be aware of that. Be mindful, because you can really make someone's day, just by if you're not the type that normally reaches out to somebody and you just all of a sudden out of the blue reach out, you could actually help that person, because a lot of times you won't know it. They're not going to come and tell you, yo, I'm struggling with depression.
Right.
Most people are scared to open up about that. I mean, obviously, I kind of thrive on it. But there's times even myself where I struggle, and I know that you've reached out to me numerous times, Jay, I haven't heard from you in a while. You okay? And just hearing that can make somebody kind of snap out of it. So just be aware of that. And like I said, I always bring it up at this time of the year because it's very tough in the holidays.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something we want to talk about. Continue to bring it into the limelight. And Jay, just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, right? To talk about something that I shared on Wednesday night, and I want to just bring it back again, just for this what might be a different audience. I saw an article about John Cena earlier this week, and John Cena just recently, and I don't know the exact day and time, right? But he just recently set the Guinness Book of World Records for most Make-A-Wish wishes granted. He has granted somewhere between 650 and 700 Make-A-Wish wishes, which again speaks to more of his character than anything else that I would ever think of. So huge shout out to him, huge kudos to him for bringing that that awareness to something that is important for the people that are asking for those wishes, considering the situations that they're in. So
that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, pretty cool, right? And the fact that he's doing them in different cities and he's doing them in different all over the world is just a huge deal. So listen, Jay, before we jump out, right, I wanted to share something we had on our Drunk on the Fighting show the other night. We had the guys from the Drunk Phils fans, which is it's an account on all social media platforms. They do a lot of really cool interactive stuff throughout the games, but they have a really cool, exciting project that they are working on today that is debuting at a local brewery, Von C Brewing in Norristown. They are going to be debuting their 700 level lager for a limited release today between 12 and 4. So if you're in the Norristown area, if you're around the Elmwood Zoo, you're right around the corner. So wanted to give those guys a shout out, and just something that a cool project that they're working on. And just excited to share anytime we have anything going on in our social media community. Want to try to get that news out there. And not for nothing, Jay, but pretty cool design too.
I love it.
And so when I was talking to them, so all of their artwork is all done by their guys, all internally. So, and one of the guys, I'm not sure who, but one of the guys in these images is actually the artist. It's like a self-portrait of one of them. I don't know who, but it's one of their admins.
That's a pretty impressive beard. He would give Phil a run for his money,
right? So, Jay, with that, brother, I feel like, considering what's going on in Philly sports, it's only appropriate to go out with Uncle Jack.
Hey, listen to this guy. Tell me how you're feeling here. You're screaming.
I am stoked, baby.
You're screaming like it's still the game going on.
We're talking about the fightings here. The fightings. Said.